Sarah yawned, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. She'd just finished a double shift at the hospital. The clock on the dashboard glowed 2:13 a.m. Empty coffee cups littered the passenger seat, a testament to her long night. Just a little further, she mumbled to herself, gripping the steering wheel a bit tighter. The highway stretched out before her, swallowed by the darkness. Each streetlight felt like an island in a sea of black. The only sound was the hum of her car engine and the occasional chirp of crickets. Sarah wished she'd waited until morning to drive home, but her cozy bed just a short drive away beckoned her. She turned up the radio, hoping to find some company in the late-night static. A burst of static was followed by an old country song, the mournful tune doing little to ease her growing unease. Why did the road seem so much longer tonight? Every shadow seemed to twist and writhe, taking on menacing shapes in her tired mind. The GPS announced, "Turn left in 500 feet, her exit was coming up." Relief washed over her, a brief reprieve from the unnerving emptiness of the highway. She exited onto the deserted country road that led to her house. This stretch was always a little creepy, even in daylight. Trees lined the road, their branches intertwining overhead to form a tunnel of darkness. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, the beams seeming to shrink in the suffocating blackness. Sarah tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling herself it was just her exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But her heart pounded a steady rhythm against her ribs. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the crunch of gravel under her tires. Even the crickets had gone quiet. The song on the radio ended, replaced by more static. Sarah reached to change the station, finding only the same hushed white noise. She finally switched it off, the silence inside the car now mirroring the unsettling silence outside. As Sarah drove deeper into the woods, a faint light flickered in the distance. It appeared and disappeared with the rhythm of her car, like a lighthouse warning of unseen dangers. She slowed down, her pulse quickening. Was someone out here at this hour? The light seemed to be coming from a dirt road that branched off from the main road. Curiosity warred with fear. Part of her wanted to turn back, to drive straight home and forget about the light. But another part, a small persistent voice, whispered that maybe someone needed help. She'd seen enough emergencies in her job to know that ignoring a potential cry for help could have dire consequences. Steeling herself, Sarah took a deep breath and slowly turned onto the dirt road. The car bumped along the uneven surface, the headlights illuminating dense undergrowth that seemed to press in on either side. The flickering light grew brighter as she approached, revealing the silhouette of a lone figure standing next to a broken-down truck. As Sarah drew closer, she could see that the figure was a young woman, her face illuminated by the pale glow of her cell phone. Relief washed over Sarah. It wasn't an emergency, just a stranded motorist. She pulled up behind the truck, her headlights casting long shadows that danced in the trees. Sarah rolled down her window. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The young woman turned, her face momentarily obscured by shadow. When she stepped into the light, Sarah gasped. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. The woman's lips moved, but no words came out. She pointed urgently at her phone, then back at Sarah. Sarah's phone chose that moment to come to life, the radio crackling to life with a burst of static before a man's voice boomed through the speakers. "Get out of the car! Get out of the car now!" Section 5, The Vanishing Act. The blood drained from Sarah's face. Who was this? How had he accessed her phone? She fumbled for the volume button, turning the voice down as her heart hammered a frantic tattoo against her ribs. The young woman outside was waving frantically for her to leave, her face contorted in a silent scream. Sarah threw the car in reverse, the engine roaring in protest. As she backed away, her headlights swept across the clearing. The young woman was gone. She slammed on the brakes, her mind reeling. 1 minute she was there, pleading for help, and the next, she'd vanished. Had she imagined the whole thing? Panic choked her. She spun the car around, tires spitting gravel, and sped back towards the main road. The man's voice on the radio was a distant murmur, drowned out by the frantic pounding of her heart and the blood rushing in her ears. She glanced at her phone, the screen dark and lifeless, but she could have sworn she heard his voice, chilling and real. Section 6, Red Flags. Back on the main road, Sarah gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Her mind replayed the last few minutes, each detail sharper, more terrifying than the last. The flickering light, the young woman's fear, the man's voice on her phone, none of it made sense. She glanced at her rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights looming behind her, but there was nothing but the impenetrable darkness. She pressed her foot down on the accelerator, the car responding with a surge of speed. The quiet country road now seemed menacing, each shadow a potential hiding place. Logic battled with fear. Had she imagined the young woman? Was the voice on the radio just a prank, a cruel trick of the late hour? But deep down, a primal fear told her to run. Something wasn't right. The empty road, the sudden disappearance, the voice on her phone, they were all red flags, warning her of an unseen danger. Section 7. A desperate call. Sarah fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. The line rang and rang, each tone a hammer blow against the silence. Come on, she muttered, her voice tight with panic. Just when she was about to give up, a voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? Relief flooded her. I need help. I think someone is following me. She rattled off her location, her voice high and breathless. The operator's voice was calm, reassuring. Stay on the line, ma'am. We're dispatching a unit to your location. Sarah glanced nervously at her rearview mirror. Still nothing. But the feeling of dread hadn't abated. Please hurry, she whispered, her voice choked with fear. The operator's voice crackled through the speaker. Ma'am, are you still there? Ma'am? The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone in disbelief. First the radio, now this. Fear threatened to consume her. She was alone, lost on a deserted road in the dead of night. The silence was almost unbearable, broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing and the pounding of her heart. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her eyes scanning the road ahead, searching for any sign of life, any sign of help. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The road seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning through the dark woods. The trees pressed in on either side, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to grab her. Sarah's mind raced, conjuring up terrifying possibilities. What if the police didn't find her in time? What if the man on the radio found her first? The fear was a living thing now, slithering through her veins, squeezing the air from her lungs. She had to get out of here. She had to get to safety. Just when her hope began to dwindle, a beacon in the distance. A gas station, bathed in the warm glow of fluorescent lights, materialized out of the darkness like a mirage. Relief washed over her, so potent it brought tears to her eyes. She steered towards the light, her pulse quickening with every foot that brought her closer. As she pulled into the deserted gas station, the silence of the night pressed in once more. The only sound was the gentle hum of the pumps and the distant chirping of crickets. She sat in her car for a moment, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear, her mind struggling to make sense of what had just transpired. She stepped out of the car, her legs shaky beneath her. The cool night air hit her like a slap, clearing her head slightly. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The gas station, though deserted, offered a small sanctuary, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Inside the gas station, Sarah found solace in the familiar scent of coffee and gasoline. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the aisles of snacks and drinks. Behind the counter, a lone cashier dozed, oblivious to her arrival. Sarah approached the counter, her hand trembling as she reached for her wallet. "Coffee, please," she croaked, her voice hoarse from disuse. The cashier, startled awake, mumbled a greeting and began preparing her coffee. As she waited, Sarah glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost 4 a.m. The events of the past hour seemed surreal, like something out of a nightmare. The deserted road, the vanishing woman, the voice on her phone, had they really happened? Or had her exhaustion finally gotten the better of her? The cashier placed the steaming cup of coffee on the counter. "Anything else?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. Sarah shook her head, her gaze falling on a rack of local newspapers behind the cashier. A headline caught her eye, sending a chill down her spine. "Local woman goes missing on Route 12, foul play suspected," the headline screamed. A picture of the young woman from the dirt road staring back at her. But it couldn't be her. Could it? She was right there just minutes ago. Sarah's blood ran cold. She looked from the newspaper to the cashier, then back again. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass counter, her face pale, her eyes wide with dawning horror. The voice on the radio, the empty clearing, it all came crashing down on her. She wasn't imagining things. She had been close, so close to becoming another victim. And the most unsettling thought of all, the ghost had tried to warn her.